88.1 WHOV welcomes you to the Pastor's Study. The Pastor's Study in your church or any church is a place where the pastor goes to collect his thoughts, hear from God, study God's Word, and develop ideas and thoughts on what direction the church needs to take in leading others to Christ. The Pastor's Study is where the road to salvation is paved and the mysteries of the Bible revealed. The Pastor's Study on WHOV is a talk show that allows you, the listener, to come inside to find out more about the ministers of the gospel in the area and the good works they're doing across the region, the nation, and the world. Now here's your host, Pastor Kevin Swan of Ivy Baptist Church in Newport News, Pastor Ray Johnson, and Pastor John Young of Empowered Believers Christian Learning Center. The Pastor's Study is now open to the public, so come on in and find out God's plan for your life and his people.
What's good, everybody? Welcome to the Pastor's Study on Smooth 88.1 WHOV, iHeartRadio. We're glad to have you with us today live. Well, we're not live in studio, but we are live on the air. We still are practicing social distancing and making sure that everybody is safe. And so I want to take a moment to thank Station Manager Jay Lang and Assistant Manager Kevin Moose Anderson, who's on the board right now as we speak, to make sure that we're able to do the show remotely. And so we have with us today, you know, I get my chance to do the big introduction, and I'm going to make sure that I do it. You know, this is a new season for me right now. You know what I'm saying? I've been in my house. I've had a lot of time to reflect, and so I'm going to do the introduction right today.
Yeah. Oh, let's see this.
Ladies and gentlemen, Albion Lyons.
Kevin Swan. See, you know what? I have decided that I'm going to have a conversation with your wife because I recognize that she has powers of persuasion that you have absolutely no strength against. So I think I'm going to have to unite with my sister around this poor behavior.
Don't play the sister sticking together card. We're not going to play that.
No.
That's how y'all do.
Absolutely no.
Listen,
because she's a special brand of sister, because that's my dude right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're a special brand.
Yeah, y'all are special.
I'm calling trees.
But Miss Albion, how are you?
I am really, really good. I almost feel guilty. I must admit, guys, I almost feel guilty. I am an extrovert, so I do miss people in terms of, and I'm a hugger on top of that. Everybody knows I flirt with everybody, including, you know, fat old ladies and janitors. I don't care. I love everybody. But I really am enjoying this hiatus, so to speak. I mean, I recognize the magnitude of what we're dealing with, but I adjust and adapt very quickly to things, and I'm wondering how I'm going to do when Matt Lyons has to go back to work. Like, I'm just not so sure how I feel about not being able to reach out and touch him like anytime I want, all day long. So this is going to be interesting in our readjustments. But before we get into all of that deliciousness and all the other things that are connected to it, I have a job to do that I will do properly because I know the Lord for real.
Say so.
Okay? I have the privilege of being able to bring into the conversation the man whose voice all of us look forward to hearing, because he has an understanding both of God and of law. The man who ensures that justice reigns and rules in our local environment. The man who uses both his knee and sometimes influences in magnificent ways how that gavel is going to be dropped. The man who is the author of and creator, innovator of prison ministries. My brother, play if you want to, Pastor Law, Commonwealth Attorney Anton Bell.
That's how you do it, Kevin. That's how you do it.
She said innovative ways for prison ministry.
Innovative. You got to be creative. You got to be creative.
But it all ends up in the same place. You're going to get locked up.
It's got to be creative. The Holy Spirit will lead you to all truth. All truth.
Commonwealth Attorney Bell, how are you, sir? You holding on, man? You hanging in there?
I'm yet holding on, as they said back in the day. I'm yet holding on.
Now, listen, I gotta say at the onset of this show, you know, y'all are tight. And I'm just going to say at the beginning of the show, y'all ain't going to be coming for me today. You understand me? I ain't going to answer.
I'm just saying. It's going to be what it's going to be.
It's going to be what it's going to be. Yeah. So listen, so we got a great show lined up for today. Interesting discussion. Listen, because we are doing it remotely, we cannot take phone calls, unfortunately, but we do have a great topic of discussion today. What we need everybody to do, if you're listening, we need you to go to the Pastor Study page on Facebook right now, the Pastor Study. The question of the day is already posted. And we just need you to offer your comment. We're going to share it on the air, have lots to discuss, and we want to hear your thoughts. As always, you know, we like to have a good time. As you can tell, we have a good time with each other. But you, the listening audience, really is what makes the show special. So we want to make sure that you are included and that your voice is being heard. So we're going to take a break here. When we come back on the other side, we're going to get into our question of the day. Hope you enjoyed the show so far. This is Smooth 88.1 WHOV. And we're back on Smooth 88.1 WHOV. Welcome to the Pastor Study. Pastor Kevin Swan, Miss Albion Lyons. That was better, wasn't it? Wasn't that better? That was better, right?
You put a little energy on that.
A little bit more energy. And then Pastor Law is also with us, Commonwealth Attorney Anton Bell. Now, has anybody called you Pastor Law this week? That's all I need to know, man.
No, I have not really seen many people in the public because of the safe distancing and so forth. And so, unfortunately, I have not seen, you know, much of the public to have that type of conversation. But the last time, yes, because it was actually a neighbor, someone in the neighborhood, and they were actually walking. And I was driving by, and they called me Pastor Law.
Very good. I'm on a personal mission for people to call you Pastor Law. They not even go, what's your real name? You know how black people, you don't know people's real names. They ain't going to know your real name.
Nickname.
Yeah, you Pastor Law now. You Pastor Law. So listen, before we get into our question of the day, we do have a note of seriousness to share with you, and that is for some jurisdictions, y'all, there is still on record a May 5th election. Now, we suspect that election date is going to change. However, as of right now, it has not changed, and General Assembly is convening as we speak, and they have to vote on the date being changed. So as of right now, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to vote by absentee ballot, which is the surest way that you can make your voice be heard, then the deadline is April the 28th for a May 5th election. Now, again, probably sometime this week, there will be an announcement to say whether or not the date has been changed. So if it is not going to be changed, if it's going to still stand at May 5th, the deadline for absentee ballot or to request an absentee ballot is April the 28th. And you can contact your municipality for more information. But I think, guys, we all believe that the date probably is going to be changed, right?
I would hope so.
Oh, yeah, I think it most likely will be changed, but I don't think it'll be changed to, like, in the fall. I think it'll still be in the late spring or early summer.
Yeah, and this election, by the way, is very important because you have on the ballot mayor races, you have city council races, you have school board races, and just remind the people very quickly how important local politics is to everybody.
Okay, so with local politics, we have to understand that most people come out and vote in federal elections and even state elections, but it is the local politicians that have the biggest impact on your everyday living. For instance, your school system. The school boards are up for re-election on this coming May. You have your mayors and you have your city council members. They are the ones who implement local ordinances and policies that are set to enhance your living in your particular locality or could somehow limit your living ability in those localities. They are the ones that choose the city manager, who chooses the police chief. They are so that controls your safety in your local counties. They set tax rates. and also give pay increases to teachers and to your different entities that are government employees. And so it is extremely important to understand that they have a direct impact on your everyday living and how great or how bad your living may be in that locality.
Absolutely. So once again, May 5th, right now, as of today, is still the election day. We anticipate that's going to change, but still, nevertheless, be aware and be looking out on the news if the date is in fact changed. And so that's just your public service announcement. But we want to get into the question of the day today, and it has to deal with what we're seeing now across the United States, Alvin and Pastor Law, and that is especially this whole notion of these uprisings, for lack of a better term, for people going to state capitals and essentially protesting that people are still having to have social distancing and stay-at-home orders. And now what we're seeing is Florida and Georgia, two states in particular that are not too far from us, by the way, are opening up or going to reopen their states for business and for commerce and for people to go out again. And so this is our question of the day today. We want to hear from you. Leave your comment on the Pastor Study Facebook page and let us know, and we'll share your comment on the air. So, Commonwealth Attorney, I want to start with you, man, from a legal perspective, man. And you're hearing that states are reopening. How do you feel about that, man?
Well, you know, they have the absolute right to do that. From a legal perspective, I know there's been some conversation concerning the federal government having the authority to reopen, and that no federal law currently exists that gives the federal government the right to reopen businesses or even to close businesses, including the Public Health Service Act or the Stafford Act. There's nothing in either one of those acts that can be read to confer such authority on the president. However, Congress could enact a law, which I doubt will ever happen, to do that. But the federal government doesn't have that right. Should it happen? I'm trying to read the signs, because you have legislators and executives making these decisions. And my question is, what are the scientists saying? Is it right? You know, is the time right to do that? Or is it premature? And as a result, it's going to cause more deaths.
Yeah, and we know that a lot of this issue is the economy versus safety of the public, and there are people who are on both sides who seem to believe you can do both in certain cases. But to your point, the scientists are saying one thing, and then other people are saying another thing. So, Alvin, how about you? What are your thoughts on Georgia and Florida in particular deciding to reopen at this point?
Well, I mean, for me, there's no question about the fact that it's a economic issue. The other thing is a lack of understanding, because what we're facing is a deficit in knowledge around epidemiology. See, a lot of the states and the individuals specifically who are kind of behind the idea of opening up states are operating from the perspective that I don't see a large representation of active cases in my area, so why are we locked down? But what's not understood are two primary things. One, that this particular administration, you know, for their perfections and imperfections, depending upon what side of the aisle you were on and what looking glass you were observing through, has had some real difficulty around one of the most important issues, and that is broad spectrum testing. We underestimated as a nation, the CDC and the WHO have both spoken to these issues. We underestimated the level of spread that is originating from non-symptomatic individuals. So the only way for us to effectively assess whether or not it is truly safe to be opening up a state, a city, a local municipality is to have a broad enough spectrum of testing to ensure that you do not have active cases that are going back out into the community that will ultimately be responsible for community spread. I do understand that individuals are saying, because I have lots of conservative friends who are saying that the mental health industries are experiencing an uptick in depression, suicide, anxiety, and while I am not arguing that that is not that's not true. I agree that there are increases in that, but I will also say that those increases do not in any way outpace the number of lives that could be potentially impacted by prematurely opening up the states. And when we think about community spread, that is beyond whether or not that's the city of Hampton or that's in Tampa, Florida, or that's in, wherever in Georgia. The issue is the fact that if somebody who is sick in one place goes to another place, that place now becomes an opportunity for spread also. So if you don't understand how the virus works, we're not going to be looking at a bell curve, which is what we've been operating with. We will be looking at a U. And that's what people are trying to avoid. So much so that, and I'll say this and then I'll pause, I am sitting as an advisor to a international crisis management team right now who's responsible for helping to navigate product acquisition for cities and states and so on and so forth. And so we get into lots of conversations, and as we are talking across states with first responders, as they are sharing with us what their needs are in vital resource acquisition, they are saying to us that they are already starting preparation for an uptick in COVID come October or November. They are already anticipating, based on all of the data that's been shared with them, that we will see a resurgence of this again in the fall. So there are different conversations that are happening in different spaces, all of which are not being communicated, and profitability and politics is a problem also.
Yeah, and you mentioned something that's important, and that is what the scientists and the doctors are calling the second wave.
Yes.
that can hit. And we're not even at the second wave yet. We haven't even gotten through completely the first wave.
We haven't even finished the first one. We still have states that haven't even hit their peak yet. So as this kind of moves across our nation, there are places right now, New York is flattening, and flattening does not mean everything is better because it's disastrous in New York. I have a family member who went to the hospital this week in New York, and was told, I cannot do the testing that you need, heart testing that you need. It's emergent, but I cannot do it without admitting you. And if I admit you, you are guaranteed to get COVID, and the likelihood of you surviving it is not good. So I need you to understand what you were saying yes to if I admit you, because 80% of my hospital has COVID right now, and that includes staff. Wow. So my family member, I was on the phone. My family member had to decide to go home and take the risk that whatever was going on cardiac related, they had a better chance of living if they stayed home than they did in the hospital, because what people aren't understanding is if you go into these hospitals, particularly in the hotbeds, your family member can't come in with you. So when people are dying in New York, they are dying alone. You cannot bring anybody into the hospital with you, period, even if you're not going in for COVID. So everyone who is dying by themselves right now.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And if you're just tuning in, we're talking about states that are considering, they're actually going to reopen, Georgia and Florida, over the course of this weekend. And what are your thoughts about that? We want to hear from you. Again, there are no call-ins today. We want to hear from you. Write your comment on our Facebook page, The Pastor's Study, and we'll share your comment on the air as we go through the broadcast. Now, let me ask you all, just as citizens right now, if you are living in Florida or Georgia, you've been cooped up in the house for 4 weeks, and Now, Alvin, you can go out and get your hair done, and Anton, you can go get a haircut now. You know, you can go. You know, y'all. And now the governor says you are able to go, and these businesses are going to be open. How would you handle that as a citizen? Would you go out immediately, or would you kind of wait? What would you do?
No,
I'm sending testers out. I want to see what happens to the first wave. Let me see how y'all do. Yes, there is no. I already told Matthew. I said, listen, let's make sure we understand each other. We're going to let a whole wave of people go out. Let them do what they do. We'll look around 21 days. We're going to check and see how folks are faring after about 3 good weeks before we do anything that's outside of this household. There's no way. I'm not interested. I'm not trying to see the Lord early. I want to be as old as possible when I go to see Jesus. So I'm not. No, ma'am. No, sir.
No. So you're saying, Alvin, you would stay in the house an additional 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks is what you're saying.
Absolutely. As long as, because a lot of entities are still going to be doing a lot of telework because we're not going to go from 0 to 100. No. And particularly in Virginia, thank God we happen to have a governor who is also a physician, so who has a broader understanding of what this stuff really means because he's been at the forefront of medical decision making. So that definitely informs the way that he is choosing to lead. Whether people agree or don't agree on the politics, what they do have to understand is that he does have a perspective that's different than most politicians would have. So we're not going to go from 0 to 100 because COVID is also not going to go from 100 to 0. There is no such thing as there's a date that this thing is just going to disappear and we're not going to see it anymore. Right. We are seeing a general dial down, but that dial down can easily spike right back up if you've got people interacting with each other carelessly now because they think that, it's all good. So I am not remotely interested as long as I can still do what I need to do remote, and both Matthew and I just happen to be in careers that we can. We don't have to rush out into the street and I feel for people who do to survive. We don't have to rush out. So for those of us who don't have to, we should keep our little happy butts at home and, kind of give the society an opportunity to slowly integrate and pay attention to what that is meaning.
Yeah. So, Pastor Law, how about you, man? Stay open, man. Huh?
Ride or die with my sister. I'm with her.
Yep.
I'm with her. The only thing that will be a little different is because I am still going in the office. I'm teleworking for the most part, but I still go in the office about 2 or 3 times a week just to make sure things are still, status quo. But as far as anywhere else, no. I'm just going to be very cautious about reintegrating with the public because, as my sister said, there is no timestamp on when there's going to be a reverse or where it's just going to just die out. And so you let that first wave go and let them test it out. And when they weigh the water and you see that there's not going to be an increase, and then you say, okay, I can step my foot in the water a little bit.
A little toe. Yep,
put a little toe up in there, and all is well.
So if you go by the timeline of the governor of Virginia, Governor Northam, he's already said June the 10th is basically the date, right? So if you're taking that same approach, are you both saying then that you're really not looking to reintegrate into the public until the end of
July
June?
1st. July 1st. Is that your We'll start opening windows on July 1st.
Opening windows.
I'll go where I have to go. Don't get me wrong. I'll go do what I have to do.
Absolutely.
Because if it's going to be open, then, courts are going to probably, step up as well. And so I'll go and do what I have to do work-wise. But outside of the work arena, I am not going to socially go out and do things the same way. No, absolutely not.
So what's
likely to happen, Kevin, is that we're probably going to see it go back to some of the measures that were ahead of the lockdown. So we will probably, just the same way we dialed up, is probably how they will dial down. So we'll probably go to a place where where you're doing, no more than 10 people together in a room again. Then, depending upon how that looks over a certain period of time, because that's what epidemiology tracks, what happens after a 2 to 3 week period of time, because that's how long the virus can kind of exist without necessarily showing itself in symptoms. So after they see 3 weeks of those cases not with there being no upticks, they're using 14 to 21 days. Then you might see spaces up to 50, which is where we started. And then after that, they'll probably watch that for another 3 weeks or so, and then say, okay, let's keep it at no more than 100. So I think that we're probably going to see the dial, assuming that we do this safely, I think we'll see a dial down in restrictions the way that we saw the dial up in restrictions.
So what do you say to people who say now, look, if you go to Walmart, it's packed. If you go to Lowe's, it's packed. If you go to Kroger, people are already kind of, it's not like it's out. I'm not trying to out these stores or anything, but you already see crowds of people, and it does not appear that people are getting sick going to these particular spaces. How do you respond to them for those who want to support the idea of let's go ahead and reopen and people just exercise safe distancing while they're in these stores?
Well, here's the thing. You don't know if they're not getting sick.
Exactly.
Because you meet these people once in the store, and then that's it. So you have no clue 14 days from that point whether they actually got sick or whether they had any symptoms whatsoever. So you just can't go by that. And the reality of it is this. Some people are going to always not believe. They're just going to doubt, and they're just going to be like, whatever, I'm going to take my risk and do whatever. And that's fine for them. That's why we all got freedom of choice.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, and to Anton's point, absolutely, there's no way for us to determine anything. A lot of carriers are not symptomatic.
Nope.
So even though you may be out there, you're doing what you're doing, everybody seems fine, nobody's necessarily touching, but you're still in close proximity and you're not wearing masks, and you've touched everything in the store. So when somebody comes behind you and touches it, and we already know that the virus can exist on surfaces, depending upon the surface constitution, for a certain amount of time, sometimes hours, sometimes up to days past, the contact. When that person then goes home and they deal with their aunt, and their aunt is fine because she's strong and healthy, but their aunt goes to spend time with their grandmother, and now their grandmother is ill, but we can't figure out what happened. If we had the capability, we could potentially track that right back to when you were at that grocery store. Mm-hmm. But we don't have the capability to do that kind of virus genesis. So we're all just guessing, and the only thing that they're using are death rates. The number of positive tests and death rates that they can confirm in the hospitals. But there are people who die at home, never been tested. There are people who are going to die in the hospital who never got tested. Yep. There are multiple components inside of the data that we don't have, which is why an abundance of caution is the best way to protect people. And obviously we don't want to cripple our economy forever and ever, and I get that. But the question is, would you rather be broke or dead? And you have to decide, what is it? Which one is it for you?
For some people, being broke feel like death.
Apparently.
So I think that's where people are kind of struggling with trying to figure out what to do. And let me just say right now, we all are in agreement that stay at home is the best course of action right now.
Absolutely.
But we are playing the other side for radio today just because we can. And so I got a comment from somebody. And again, we want you to share your feedback on our Facebook page, The Pastor Study. Let us know what you think about this subject. Florida and Georgia are reopening this weekend. Too soon? Is it okay? How do you feel about it? Want to hear from you. I do have a comment from Mike. Mike said, take a look at the leadership of the states that are opening. They all are led by Republican governors. And we all know that the right has always shown that their focus is more about having money. Having said that, the citizens still have a choice to do what is right and safe. Now, we know that the Pastor Study is not a political show. Let's just start off with that. But could there be an argument? Do you all see that slant in this particular instance that Could it be that the states that are reopening are doing so who have Republican governors who want to be in line with President Trump's message to reopen?
Go ahead, Anton, because I certainly have my opinion.
Well, you know what they say, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And so that is, the sense, that is the perception that you have some mini-me's who are trying to mimic their leadership. And as a result of that, they are following the same rhetoric and they are following the same behavior. And I can give you an example of that. Prior to those individual states, those same states closing, if you remember, they closed on the same day within hours of each other. Right. It was Georgia, it was Florida, it was Mississippi. And they all were saying, no, we're not going to close, And then the media reported that the president called down to Florida. And once he called down to Florida, they decided to close the beaches. And right after that, you saw Mississippi and Georgia. And Mississippi governor at one point, like within 24 and 48 hours prior to that, was like he wasn't closing anything. In fact, there were local localities who had closed or had done shelter in places, and he overrode and said, no, we're opening it up for the entire state. So it seems that the perception is that they are following their party leader.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And then keep in mind that one of the things that the president knows that is true about most people, unfortunately, and when I say most people, I'm really talking about business more than anything else, will put profit over people. And it's one of the ugly truths about our American culture that we will often choose that. And what has made it possible, without getting overly political, is the willingness for us to turn a blind eye to leadership as long as the economy is good. So it doesn't seem to matter what leadership does, whatever level we're talking about, as long as you are responsible for a strong economy. So if I am laden with inappropriate actions, mistruths, alternative facts, the list goes on. If that's who I am, and I have seemingly been able to avoid all consequence of those things, then there has to be something that has made that possible. And that possibility has often been fueled by the fact that we have had a great economy. Now, if that is taken away, then the question is, will all of the other stuff suddenly become an issue? That is the safeguard. So as we are approaching election cycles again, we need to ensure the safeguard that is going to make it possible for a certain leadership to be able to continue to maintain their current position. So I'm 100% sure that there's an economic underpinning to all of that, but that economic underpinning has a direct correlate to political outcomes and voting outcomes. So there's no way for us to pretend as if you can parse those two independently.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And look, we're not here to pit Republicans versus Democrats. We're not here to do that. But the facts are the facts. And the fact is that the last states to close, to do a shutdown, and if I'm not mistaken, there were a couple that didn't shut down at all. All of them had Republican governors. And the first states to want to reopen are Republican governors. And so the listening audience, you can take that however you want to take it, but those are the facts. And does it appear that they are doing so because we have a Republican president? It seems to me, I'm just speaking of me, that might be the case. Some may disagree with that, but it does seem to me that that's how it's looking. And so want to also mention on a comment, because people are commenting on our Facebook page. Gail says she's a healthcare worker, and she says in all caps, absolutely not, that there should be a reopening. Virtual services should be fine. God has provided medical experts, so why aren't we relying on the medical experts to give us the best advice? And it seems to me that what I find interesting, y'all, is that Dr. Fauci, who has been through all of these pandemics, it seems to me that he's getting death threats and all kinds of stuff.
Yep. Well, who is he getting it from? Who is he getting it from?
Well, again, you tell me.
Know.
Yeah.
You already know. You already know. As a matter of fact, we even have an Indiana congressman who said that he was willing to let more people die in order to save the economy.
Yes, he did.
So Trey Hollingsworth of Indiana, and it's on, you can check it out on NBC News. So it's not, right-wing, left-wing politics, any of that, just NBC. Just that, and if you Google it, you can find it anywhere. But he is not the only public servant who has said that they are willing to sacrifice older, susceptible individuals, because those are the people who are dying. So your grandmother and your older auntie, we're willing to sacrifice those people in order to save our way of living. And our way of living based on what? Because if our way of living is based on life and love, then we would be more interested in saving our grandmother and our auntie. But if our way of living is about consumerism, materialism, and the ability to spend more money, then we would have a very different orientation. And let me be clear, I'm not suggesting that people who just want to do honest work to take care of their families are in that category of folks who are willing to sacrifice anybody. But the people who are driving the conversation, these are not people who have missed a single paycheck. These are not people who even spend time with people who are missing paychecks. These are people who are making decisions based on electability. So it's hard to pretend that politics has not been a factor in the decision-making or even the narrative that is going forth around the conversation we're having.
And I would add the media portrayal of it, too. I mean, because you have media outlets that are also politically bent. And so depending on what you – and that's also a challenge, because depending on what channel you watch, you'll get the political spin that is associated with it. And this is not a political issue. That's the most frustrating part to me. This is a health pandemic issue, and it should be just that, not spun any other way. And we should be focusing, all of us, regardless of what party affiliation we are allegiant to getting our nation safe and healthy and back on its feet. I want to bring in another comment. Sandy mentioned something that I want to kind of touch on, too. She said that the realization that we are actually in a pandemic did not become real to me until just a little over 30 days ago. I questioned many of the things that are being done and the precautions that are being taken. Then she says, as being a healthcare worker as well as in a group home working directly with individuals, you are counting on me to do what I can because they cannot control their environment. So I believe that every precaution should be taken. So in looking at this, Sandy is saying, I believe that there are a lot of people out there like this, y'all, that maybe when they saw this first happening, they didn't really think that it was as big of a deal at first as it could have been, right? And then you look at the fact that in our country, every single year, 30 to 40,000 people a year die from the flu.
Well, actually, it goes up to 70,000. So 30 to 70,000 Americans die from the flu. Yep.
And so nobody even blinks when we hear 50, 60,000 people every year die from the flu.
Right.
So
because we got Tamiflu. And so because you got Tamiflu, then people are thinking there's a cure or there's some type of help, even though people are dying, but you have something. There is nothing right now for
that's effective.
This virus.
Yep.
But
and then the other thing, that the mortality rates around this virus are not the same as the flu. So the mortality rates for this virus in some populations, because it depends on what demographic you're looking at, are 10 times higher than the flu. So we are not, in no situation have we seen a world economy pause for the flu. So we're dealing with something different than the flu, because we've had the flu for as long as there have been humans. But you have literally watched every nation be impacted by COVID and every economy pause for a reason. So this is not about American red versus blue, Democrats and Republicans fighting for political power. The whole world is impacted, and they could care less about our political power. We have real people dying everywhere as a byproduct of this.
You're absolutely right. And I'm just playing the other side today for radio, right? Because,
of course.
You know, we agree to all of that. But what do you say to people who say, well, you know what, every year hundreds of thousands of people die in car accidents. There's no cure for that. People still decide to get in a car and they risk their life by driving. So if they are willing to risk their life by driving, why shouldn't they risk their life going to the store and taking precautions, just like you would get in a car and put a seatbelt on and do whatever else, because you have other instances where there are lots of deaths that occur, and yet we as a nation don't even blink. It doesn't even register with us how many hundreds of thousands of people die in other areas, but we have shut the economy down. I'm not saying that that's right, but I'm saying that a lot of people do feel that way. How do we respond to that?
It's funny because my teenager said something similar. I'm sorry, Anton, and then I promise I'll shut up. But my teenager said something similar to me one day, and I was like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And the reason why I say that is because that's the equivalent of me saying, you can have the keys to the car. The brakes are out on the car. But, you know, after all, you know, like people die every day. So, I mean, like if you handle it pretty well, chances are, and if you don't speed, chances are you could find your way to a stop even though the brakes really don't work. So the reality is that the same experience is happening inside of our nation. There are deaths that we cannot prevent. That is absolutely true because of the way that people have made their decisions and the like. But if we know that we've got 100,000 cars that could potentially be riding around without brakes, and the way to ensure that there are not those accidents is to ensure that those cars stay parked in the driveways until the brakes are fixed, then it makes sense that nobody drives those cars that have no brakes on them. It makes sense that we sit still while we are addressing the issue that needs to be addressed in order to mitigate, because we can't guarantee anything, but to mitigate the number of deaths that we would be facing. That would be my immediate response, because that is such a teenager, like, I'm immortal, it's going to happen, you know, YOLO, you only live once anyway. You know, like, that is so short-sighted in terms of the implications. And what's sad is it's never the person who makes the stupid decision that ends up sick. It ends up being some innocent person who's trying to mind his or her own business that you went to go see or you know, were near, and they end up dying because of your stupid decisions. So that's where I'm like, I feel like sometimes we got to save people from their own dumb decisions.
To sum that up, your poor choices impact me in a way that the other things have never impacted our community before. Mm-hmm. So you making a bad choice to socially not be distant to others and to go out and just do whatever you want to do, unfortunately, it could have a very negative ramification on our community as a whole.
Yeah, very quickly. Yeah, and again, because most people aren't thinking about others. They're thinking about themselves. And, you know, I was talking to my wife about this last night. Is, you know, the real issue of the coronavirus is people don't like to be told what to do, right? And so, you know, when we're working all the time, you want to be at home. You are praying for the time and you could be at home to chill and to rest and have a break. Now you got a break, and now you want to go out. You know, it's like never people are satisfied with unless they can do whatever they want to do. And in this case, looking out for your fellow man, looking out for a family member. I mean, even myself, I'm very cautious about going around my parents because my parents are elderly, and I want to make sure that I don't, because I can't nobody can 100% say, because we haven't been tested, to say that we have it or not. So I'm not even going around them as much as I would like. I call them on the phone or talk to them often. But you have to use common sense here and exercise some safe precautionary measures. So here's what I want to do. I want to take the last remaining part of the show and talk about the church now.
Let's.
Oh, Lord.
So if you are in Florida and Georgia.
Nah, bro.
And they can reopen this weekend.
Open all you want.
Would you go to church if your church was open this weekend? And why not?
I would get my shout on in my house, okay? Because I'm not going to the house and be around people right now. No, absolutely not.
So again, for the pastor who says we will practice social distancing, we'll keep you 6 feet apart, we'll make sure that we don't fellowship, hug each other, and we won't give high fives, and we'll do all the measures. We just want to come and worship like Walmart is open, like any other store is open. Do you have an issue with that?
I do. I mean, and I love, do not get me wrong, you know, everybody knows I'm a Jesus freak. I love me some Jesus, and I love church folk, and I go to multiple church services on a Sunday. Not required, but I will go to more than one because that's how much I enjoy the fellowship that I get to have with other believers. But when it comes to this, we just saw, and you guys may remember the name of the pastor, I could pull it up, but we just saw a pastor who decided he was not going to shut down his church, and unfortunately, he died from COVID because
and his wife.
His wife ended up dying. Okay.
No, she didn't die.
She didn't die, but she got it. And so here we are, and I am not saying that we don't have a God that can be stronger than COVID, but I am also saying that we have a God that gave us wisdom. That is part of we have free will, but he gave us wisdom. And the Bible even tells us don't test God. Like, we're not even supposed to, that's not even what we're supposed to do. Lord, if you love me, if I step off of this balcony, you will ensure that I won't die. And when you die, that's not God's fault. He told you about gravity. We already know it exists. So I really don't understand why we would purposely create environments where there's opportunity for Satan to be able to have his way where believers are concerned. I don't understand that, especially considering there's a meme that's out that I thought was so beautiful. It's a cartoon, and it has the devil and it has God having a conversation over the earth. And Satan says that he's successful because he shut down the churches. So basically he stopped God. And God smiles and he says, oh, contrary, what you did was open up 1 billion churches inside of every home. And I said, that is exactly how we should be seeing this. Pastor after pastor after pastor who's been able to equip themselves to evolve in terms of technology are talking about the fact that they have more people inside of their services online than they ever have had in 3 services on any given Sunday. So we are opening up churches all over the place inside of people's homes. Families are communicating about the message. What did you learn? Did that thing touch you? All kinds of stuff that is not happening when we do the lazy Christian thing where it's your pastor's responsibility to make sure that God is delivered. It's your pastor's responsibility to make sure that your kids are raised right. And your pastor's responsibility, because that was never the job of the pastor. But now we're having to be priests of our own homes as a byproduct of the gift of the teachers, pastors, who are out there using technology to remind us who we are in that word.
Yeah, and listen, I understand that, right? But you also know and realize that many pastors have adopted let's do a drive-in service, right? So Pastor Young of our show is doing a drive-in service.
I'm with that.
Creative.
So
I'm with that.
It is very creative, and it's innovative, and it's bringing people to the church.
Maxwell is doing the same thing.
Pastor Maxwell, there are lots of churches that are doing drive-in service, which is a phenomenal idea. Let me say that. But if you open the doors of the church, why would you believe then that they would continue to do a drive-in? Why would they just go inside if you're bringing me to the church, right? So again, I'm asking you all, if people are already still coming to the church, would we not believe that once the ban has been lifted, that now I will say this, it all depends on the ban number. Like, for example, if the ban is lifted to 50 people,
or 50, right?
Yeah, then you know most people would still have to do a drive-in, right? You know,
right.
But let's say the ban is lifted to 50.
Lifted, period.
Let's say the ban is lifted to 50, but you have an average congregation, a smaller church of say 25 people, right? So you're well within the number of the ban. Right. Are you saying you as a member if your church practiced social distancing and did all of the necessary things, and now your doors are open, you wouldn't go?
No, I wouldn't. I really wouldn't.
No,
because one of my churches is a smaller church that I love. One of the churches, my home church, what I just absolutely love, and I wouldn't go. And I wouldn't go for two reasons. One, my son is a juvenile diabetic. I have a responsibility to ensure that I don't bring anything home to my son. So even though he may make some dumb decisions on his own because he's 18, I am not going to be party to participating in that. That's number one. And number two, I know too many people who are in the healthcare industry that if there's nothing I can do to make your job easier, the least I can do is not make it harder. And so I would, out of respect for the sacrifices you're making, that you can't even go home to your kids for fear that you're going to expose your kids to the foolishness that we are responsible for out here, I will not add to that population for you because it's hard enough already. So I think I owe it to two people not to do that.
All right, so we're almost out of time, believe it or not. So let me ask you this. You all said earlier that once the ban is lifted, if it were Virginia, if Governor Northam stays at June the 10th, that means you all said, you know what, I probably wouldn't roll out until July.
July 1.
Is that same timeline for you for going back to church as well?
Well, see, here's the thing, Kevin, that some people are missing. Many churches are flourishing right now.
Yes.
Because you now have opened up your ministry to the world, because now they're doing it by way of the internet, and they're doing it by way of apps, and as well as the drive-bys. Like, my church, shout out to CRC because I love my church family, but they are seeing an uptick in people giving their lives to Christ and people joining the church online.
Yep.
I know that. Listen, it is powerful, and we are a part of that. Ivy is experiencing all of that. Yeah. But what I'm saying though is at some point the doors of the church will know that, right? So I'm asking you all, as a member of a congregation, at what point would you feel comfortable going back into the church? Not a drive-in, nothing like that. If
the doors of the church ain't going to reopen for me until July 1st. How about that?
I'm with Anton, and that's really based on what the numbers look like. Yeah. And when I say the numbers, I'm talking about the science behind it. So even if the doors open up, if that spike starts to happen again, I'm still not going. So, it is just, for me, it's a personal responsibility thing, and I will continue to give just as much. I will be in every service. I'll be in more than one service because I'm at home. What you doing anyway? I watch 3-4 services, and I'll sow into multiple churches. But I am not going until there is a true green light that this thing is as dead as it can be relative to our societies in terms of everything.
And on that note, we got to end. Great conversation, y'all. Love y'all, man. Appreciate y'all doing that.
We love you, too. We love you all, our listening audience. Thank you guys for being so faithful, just in and out of season. You guys are the best.
Yep, and lots of good comments on Facebook. Continue to leave those, too, by the way. We'll check them out. Until next time, we got to run. Be blessed and be a blessing to someone else. This is Smooth 88.1 WHOV.